All right, so again, I am so happy this evening to welcome Cece King and Christine Simmonds. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. They are two young journalists from our local area. Cece King is a 19-year-old writer with a background in New York government. She will discuss the important connection between local journalism and local politics and touch on the challenges she faced as a young woman trying to navigate her career in both environments. Christine Simmonds is a journalist for the Courier Gazette and a writer for Maine Women magazine. Before she transitioned into journalism, Simmonds spent many years as a special education teacher. So I think we're going to have two very different, very unique, and very important perspectives that we're going to hear from tonight. And without further ado, I would like to turn it over to our first speaker, Cece King.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be able to talk to you all tonight, and I'm so grateful to Julia for including us in her incredible programming. So I'm going to share my screen with you all so you can see a presentation I've prepared. All right, so my name is Cece King. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a sophomore at Dartmouth College, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my experiences with local politics and local journalism. So back when I was in high school, when I was in my junior year, I spent a semester studying politics and ethics at the School for Ethics and Global Leadership in Washington, D.C. And we had a whole unit on writing op-eds as a vehicle for social change. I didn't know what an op-ed was at the time, and I wasn't an avid consumer of news. So after this catalyzing experience at the School for Ethics and Global Leadership, my opinions completely changed, and I started reading the news every day, following op-ed journalists like Nicholas Kristof from the New York Times, who became one of my personal heroes. And I had previously been excited about his work from on the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So he's someone who I admired, and this program taught me that, you know, you don't actually have to be a journalist to get your work published and get yours out there. So when the Parkland massacre happened and a lot of student activists started popping up all over the country, I led a few protests in my area in the Bronx, but it didn't feel like we were getting the message outside of our little high school bubble. So I wrote an op-ed called "Help Stop School Shootings by Showing Students You Care." One night, I just sat down underneath my dining room table and wrote, because I was so infuriated at the current political climate that was putting students in danger. And I sent it to the publication that was closest to my high school. And I was so surprised to receive a response from the editor. I didn't know anybody would even be interested. And so that was when I realized that local journalism was one of the best vehicles for social change. People started reading that piece. You know, there was a journalist from that publication who wanted to come to our school, and then the administration had to get involved to navigate the media covering what the students were doing on campus, and created a much bigger audience for the thing that I wanted to do in the future. And then fast forward to a little bit later, I had been interning for my local city council member and getting really involved in New York City politics. And the Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer, appointed me to Manhattan Community Board 8, which is a local governing body that oversaw about 230,000 constituents on the east side of Manhattan. So that's when I started to dive really into local politics. And during that moment, since I was one of the youngest people on the community board, some local journalists kind of got excited and did a piece on another young female journalist, Emma Schumer, did a piece on the young female members of Manhattan Community Board 8. So already I was seeing the power of a female network, time to be involved in local politics and having all these people my age influencing city government. And then fast forward to my freshman year of college, we had about a month off during our winter break period, which we call winterim. And I didn't know what to do. My friends didn't know what to do. We were all trying to figure out how we could spend this extended period of time. And I thought, okay, I'll just get in touch with Emma Schumer, who had done this story on me and asked her to put me in touch with her editors at Strauss News. So Emma gave me the contact, and I called Alexis Gelber, who was my first editor, and I had no idea what to say, except I'm really passionate about local affairs, and local journalism would be a great way for me to continue that interest. I'm a good writer. I love to write, and I have this time, so I'd love to learn from you about how to write. She said, okay, send some clips. I didn't have any clips. I didn't have any pieces published. I hadn't written for my school publication either, so I sent her my only college essay that I'd written at the time in the fall, which was a feminist hermeneutic on the Book of Ruth for my Women and the Bible class, which was probably the opposite of what, a journalistic style of writing should be, this literary theory coming out about how to feminist interpretation of the Bible. But regardless of that, Alexis decided to take a chance on me and mentor me at the beginning of my journalism career. And it feels really funny to call this a career because I'm still a student. But that's how I got involved with Strauss News. And then these are my first bylines. I interviewed Tricia Shimamura, who I had known from the community board, and she is just someone who really inspired me. And I think something that I'm really grateful for is the fact that it's not my full-time career. And because of that, I get to choose more selectively the people who I write about. So I would pitch my own stories. I remember my first day going into Strauss, and I wore corduroys because I thought it made me look scrappy, and journalists are scrappy, so I thought it made me feel like I could fit in at the table when we went into the conference room and started, yelling out pitches. But automatically everyone was fun and exciting, and it was this energetic group of people who loved the idea of writing about Tricia Shimamura, who's running for city council and would be the first woman of color to represent the Upper East Side. So I interviewed her. And then at the same time, my editor said, oh, there's this event tonight on the Upper West Side for this organization called Save Our Stores. Go cover that. I was like, okay. And then as I was leaving the building and getting my stuff together, packing up my notepad, I realized I had never covered any kind of event before. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know if I should bring my phone to record, if I should be typing on my laptop at the same time. So I had my school backpack, and I walked into this event on the Upper West Side. And I said, hi, is Deb here? And Deb was the organizer of the event. And she said, yeah, who are you? I said, I'm Cece. I'm going to be writing about this. And she said, she was a lot taller than me. She kind of looked down and said, you're Cece? Surprised at how young I was. And I was surprised at how young I was too. But so she was a little bit skeptical, but said, okay, and led me to the front to have a good view of the speakers, who were mostly city council members. That's Gail Brewer, the Manhattan Borough president. And when I saw her, my nerves dissipated a little because I had met her before. So I was a little more comfortable all of a sudden. It wasn't as intimidating. And I didn't know what to do with myself. But there were two women behind me who were kind of chatting. And I said, hey, can I interview you? Why are you here? Why do you care about this issue? And that was my first kind of spontaneous interview. And I can be very shy. So talking to these people was a little bit scary. And also navigating a whole panel plus a whole audience and taking pictures at the same time was overwhelming at first, but I got the swing of things and I got good quotes, and I started, realizing that I could do this. And to prepare, what I had done is just read so many news articles and dissect them for how they were constructed. So I kind of had in my mind how the piece should work. And then I took it in to workshop it with my editors. And it worked. They were like, this is great. So that's when I sort of realized that I could teach myself a little bit a journalistic style of writing. And then that's when I also got more confident in just reaching out to anyone and everyone for an interview. It's kind of this exciting power that you have where you can say, hey, I'm a journalist and I'm doing a story. Can I talk to you? And it's a really good excuse to talk to anybody who looks even the remotest bit intriguing wherever you are. And then I kind of hit my first bump in the road. I interviewed another young person. He had just graduated from college, was running for city council. I wrote a story about him, and then my editor said, I was in the separate room, he was in his office, and he said, Cece, were you bored during your interview? And I said, yes. And he said, you can't do that. You can't write to reflect your impressions, your emotional reactions to people. So I'm going to teach you how to navigate this situation. And then he just sat me down, and line by line, we dissected the entire piece and figured out what to do. But he also had a few creative words of wisdom. He said, what writers do you like? And I said, Tom Wolfe. I had just finished Radical Chic and the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, and I thought they were a really interesting way to relay news. And he said, Tom Wolfe, okay, wasn't expecting that one, but describe this room where we're sitting in this office room in his voice. And so that was one of the first kind of strange writing exercises I was given, but a really helpful tip. And then throughout my time, I've been also really inspired by the subjects that I've been able to write about. So on the left is Spike Wilner, who is a jazz club owner in New York City and likened playing jazz to Zen Buddhism. And meeting people like this, I started to view the world completely differently. And exploring beyond the political, just anyone who seemed interesting in New York, it was a great opportunity to also kind of reassess what I wanted to do with my life. Was it really going to be politics? Or maybe I wanted to write about people like Spike, who thought playing jazz was like practicing Zen Buddhism. And then I met KT on the upper right corner, who is an adventure artist, who goes to the Arctic and gets molds of ice and bird feathers, and then comes back and creates these incredible sculptures. And what she said was, I like New York because the subway rats are the only wildlife that you can see. So I like the subways in New York. And then most recently, just a few weeks ago, I met David and Robin White, who are in the middle, was the chief naval architect, the chief naval architect for the U.S. Navy. And their relationship matched the mythology of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her husband Marty, in the amount of immense support that they had throughout their incredibly lofty careers. So that's what I love about journalism. And that's what I was surprised about, meeting all these people, some of whom, like KT, have actually stayed in my life and she has become a mentor of mine. So that's the best part of the job, I think. And then I came to Camden during the pandemic in March, and I had all these summer plans that were canceled, and I had no idea what to do. But we had a subscription to the Village Stoop. And I was reading it and getting to know the area, and I wished that I could get to know the area even better. So when the Camden Herald did their art competition, and I saw finally the email of one of the journalists, I emailed him and I said, who can I talk to about a potential internship or potential like freelance position? I want to write for you guys during this summer season. And so he got me in touch with Dan Dunkel, who has been also an incredible mentor to me this summer, even though we've been working remotely, and has taught me so much about not only news writing, but personal writing. He suggested I do a personal column, and that was scary. I have never written anything like that before. And then he said, you need a bio, you need a photo, you need a title. I was like, whoa, okay, Lila, my sister, quickly take a picture of me. I need something for this. And then, okay, I don't know what to do for a bio, so I scrambled to get something together, and then I started writing, originally a little bit more veering on the political. And then I got the advice to maybe be a little bit more purple in my writing. Purple meaning less political, more like a novel. So I had never practiced that style of writing. And then Dan gave me this whole long email list of exciting writing tips and people to read. So I did all that research and I took his advice and I wrote a piece called July is Looking Up and Looking Odd for the Camden Herald for my column. about these poodles who had chased me and my sister on skateboards. And it was so much fun to write, and it was such a different style. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to just try out these different ways of writing, and have someone who is so interested in mentoring me along the process. So to wrap up my presentation, I wanted to talk about how my identity has affected my work. COVID has definitely changed the way we do interviews. Now they're on phone predominantly, or even when you wear a mask, there's a level of separation between me and the subject. So it's not that same level of, when you meet someone for the first time, there's an automatic bias and an automatic impression that you get from them. And for me, it would be like this 5'2" backpack wearing teenage girl. And that's not an image that connotes respect in the minds of most people. But I think COVID has enabled me to kind of overcome that, not because of who I am, but because of the circumstances in how we're doing these interviews. But in a normal setting, I usually get just a lot of surprised reactions. And that doesn't necessarily equate disrespect, although sometimes it does. But I think when I was on Community Board 8, and I'd be talking to people from the Department of Education or different city agencies, council members, it was a less obvious power dynamic. I think with journalism, saying I'm a journalist, I will be writing this and it will go into print, makes people in some ways censor how they act around me. Whereas with the community board, they had more power than I did and knew what the community, and so it was either the constituents didn't really know what the community board was and sometimes wouldn't give me the respect of a board member because they assumed I was just a student in the audience, or the more powerful people in New York City politics who had more power would kind of brush me to the side because I was just like a newbie on the community board. So I'm really excited that journalism has this extra added piece of power to say that the writing gives me much more authority, and that's been an empowering experience. And so some goals that I have, well, I'm not really sure, again, what I want to do with my life, but I think writing is going to be a central part of it. Investigative reporting and long-term projects, going abroad, much to the chagrin of my parents, to be a war reporter is something that's been interesting to me. And so that's where my goals are. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Cece. If anyone has any questions for her, please go ahead and type them into the chat box now, and I will be sure to get those to her. I see a couple of people with little clap hands going up. So while we wait to see if any questions go in, Cece, I wanted to ask you, do you feel like there was a different flavor or style to your writing in your small town setting here versus when you were writing in New York City?
I think it's different subjects maybe that you'll talk about. Here it was really fun to write about how small business owners were dealing with the pandemic, which might have not, although I think that might have made it into the paper, the New York City paper. I think it's just more personal in this setting because the readers will know the restaurants that I'm talking about, whereas in New York it might not ring a bell because there's just so many. So I think the level of the personal nature is different. And also, if I wrote about Sandra Hamilton, I quoted her, she's the owner of Zoot, in one of my articles, but then I'll get my coffee from her. So it's definitely a different relationship.
So you mentioned that you were interested in going into more long-term investigative work and possibly, you said war correspondent or, international politics. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what experience have you had that sort of inspired you to want to explore that area?
So I lived in Morocco for a little bit studying Arabic. And that experience was one of the most formative in my life. And I've continued Arabic in school, but I wanted to to travel for the job. And also I think there's a lot of problems with the way a lot of wars are covered, and sensationalizing narratives. And I think that's a challenge. It's a challenge to cover international politics because you're coming in with your own biases from the country that you're coming from, and then projecting an image of that country back to the US. So I think that's a really important place for journalists to think very critically about the work that we're doing, and it's a challenge that I think would be really important to take on.
Thank you. We've had a comment and question come in from Joy. It says, it's hard to put your voice/opinion out there, especially as a young female voice. How do you find inspiration in choosing what you write and make sure that you are heard with such a diverse audience?
So with choosing what I write, since I've had the privilege of mostly choosing my subjects, I like to talk about people who might be ignored otherwise. So Tricia Shimamura would be the first woman of color on the New York City Council. And so that's been a historically marginalized voice, a story that hasn't come to the forefront of news. And now covering her, it was really important to me. And then in terms of making sure people respect my opinion, my voice when they read, Candidly Cece and see my picture in the Camden Herald, I'm not sure. And I'm always questioning whether they will think what I'm writing about isn't big enough, or whether or not they think I have the authority to be writing. And I think that's gendered, that line of thinking. But it's also natural since I'm new. And, but I also am lucky to have a lot of supportive people, both at the paper and then in my own life, who reassure me that it's people do respect my writing. So, but that's definitely something that I'm still struggling with.
Well, I think that you've, had some wonderful opportunities to write in different settings and at different locations and for different publications already. And I know that it sounds like a lot of those experiences have informed the way you write and how you write now and how you get your message across. So, by the way, you have to send me those tips from Dan, because he offered me a column too, and I don't know what I'm doing.
I will. So. I'm not a textbook worth. And it's all awesome advice.
All right. I look forward to reading it. Thank you, Cece. So folks, we're going to turn it over to Christine now for her portion of the presentation. And if you have any questions, any more questions that pop into your head for Cece later on, go ahead and type them into the chat box and we can always go back and we can all talk together. So Christine, if you are ready, you are welcome to take over. Let me see. There you are, Christine. Let's unmute you.
Great. It wasn't letting me unmute myself.
Oh, sorry.
I was about to start doing some sign language, flashing signs. Hi, my name is Christine Simmonds. I'm a reporter with Village Soup. Village Soup is an online platform, and we publish multiple newspapers. We publish the Camden Herald, the Courier Gazette, which is primarily the newspaper that I write for, the Republican Journal. So when we say that we work for the Village Soup, or we say we work for a certain paper, it really kind of means the same thing. I have to start by saying that I was pretty embarrassed for Cece when I saw that we were both labeled as young women in journalism, because I'm 35 years old and Cece is 19, and that's quite the age difference. For people who are much older, they still view me as a young woman who's a journalist, but for Cece, I'm sure being grouped in with a 35-year-old, I'm sure she was absolutely horrified. So I began my journey to journalism with no intention of ever doing this. I graduated from the University of Maine at Farmington with a teaching degree in 2007. I had bachelor's in secondary education English. I got a job teaching 7th grade language arts in Mexico, Maine. If you have ever been to Mexico, you know they have quite the culture there. It's a mill town, very much small town community. I grew up in Rockland. I grew up reading the Courier, reading stories by Steve Betts, who is still writing stories for the Courier. So I taught in Mexico for a couple of years. And after that, I was an educator for more than 10 years until about 2019. During that time, I was a 7th grade language arts teacher. I was a high school resource room ed tech. I was a middle school life skills ed tech. I was a substitute for grades K through 12. I was a high school life skills ed tech. I was the lead teacher in a middle school day treatment room. And I was a special ed teacher in a preschool classroom. And preschool is grades or ages 3 to 5. So I did a lot. I probably have more rounded experience as a teacher than somebody who's been teaching for 20, 30 years who's only taught one grade. So I was really fortunate to be able to experience all these different classrooms and all these different coworkers and grades and abilities with children. My certifications are in 712 language arts, 712 special education, and ages birth to 5 special education. But in 2019, in August, something changed. I wasn't really feeling education anymore. I didn't fit in. I didn't enjoy the work that I was doing. But being a teacher had always been part of my identity. That's who I was. I was a teacher. So I actually had to have somebody outside point out to me. I said, this situation is coming up. And the person said to me, Christine, do you want to keep teaching? And I really had to think hard about that. That was a really difficult decision. So there were a lot of signs from the universe that I was done teaching, how I was feeling, things that were happening in education. And I'm not usually what I call a woo-woo kind of person. I don't believe in astrology. I don't practice, things with crystals or anything like that. But I really felt like the universe was speaking to me, and I listened. And I'm really glad that I did, because I ended up here. My whole life I'd been told that I was a talented writer. I wrote eulogies for family members when they passed away. I wrote and edited people's resumes, job applications. Anytime something major happened that was going to be in the newspaper, they always sent it to me. And my recent job working in preschool, I did a monthly newsletter. And every month I would put out the newsletter, and Linda Ratcliffe, who is one of my ed techs, would look at it and she would say, Christine, you missed your calling. You need to be a writer. And I always kind of poo-pooed that and said, oh, Linda, you're so sweet. That's so nice. And then one day I saw that Village Soup was hiring a reporter. Now, I had always wanted to do that. I always thought about it. What kind of a job would that be? That would be so amazing and so fun. It's not a regular job. It's not sitting down at a desk 9 to 5, stuck. And I had always thought about it. And I grew up reading the Courier Gazette. So I sent in my resume and I interviewed with Dan Dunkel. And during the interview, I noticed Dan had a mug on his desk from a cartoon. It turned out we both watched the cartoon. So we talked about that. That probably took up more time than the actual interview. And I got the job. And I love it. I love doing this job. I feel like I'm part of my town's history, the town where I grew up, the area where I grew up. I'm part of my community. I'm writing stories that are going to be archived and that are going to be an active part of my history and the history of where I live. So it was kind of like everything just fell into place. And as I continued working for the Courier, more things started to fall into place. When I started, Village Soup and Courier Publications were in the middle of moving to a new office. So we now have a new office in Camden. for the past few months, it has not been used very much, but it's still there, and our offices are all still there ready for us. And when I started, the paper had just purchased 2 magazines, not too long before I started at the paper. That was Maine Women Magazine and Maine Senior Magazine. And Dan Dunkel was writing for Maine Seniors. If you know Dan, Dan's here on the presentation. If you know Dan, he loves to chit chat. He is a talker. So he would come out into the group and talk with everybody and say, what am I going to write about for Maine Senior Magazine this month? Who has an idea? Who knows anything about this? And so he asked, of course, everybody for ideas, and I had an idea. My grandparents live in Ocean View Senior Living Facility in Falmouth. And when Lois Lowry, who is a very well-known young adult author, Lois Lowry moved into Ocean View at one point. This was several years ago now. And my grandmother said, oh, Christine, Lois Lowry moved in here. Are you familiar with her? Do you know her? And she is one of my favorite authors. So I just went kind of completely crazy. Like, what do you mean? Do I know her? Yes, of course I know her. I love her. Can you get me to meet her? Can I find a way can I sneak into her house? You know, some way that I can meet her. That never came to fruition until February. So Dan was asking me about how, what's an idea for Senior Magazine. And I said, Lois Lowry is a senior and she lives in Maine, at least part of the time. So Dan got in contact with Lois Lowry, and I was incredibly jealous. And an email came from her to the entire news group. And the email was from Lois Lowry herself, which to me was like getting an email from like some famous, really famous actor, or that's the level that she is to me, because I grew up reading her books as well. So we got her email, and she was talking about, here are the directions to my house, and arrive at this time, and then she ended it with, I'll serve you lunch. And that was the thing that hooked me. And I said, Dan, Lois Lowry is going to serve you lunch. Are you kidding me? She's going to serve you lunch. Like, is she going to bring it out on a gold-plated platter, and there's going to be little angels singing, like, ah? And, because she's amazing. To me, she's one of the most formative authors of my childhood. And I got so excited that Dan kind of seemed a little concerned. And he said, Christine, do you just want to do this interview? And I said, are you kidding? Yes. Yes, please, I want to do this interview. So in February, I got to drive down to Ocean View, and I got to meet Lois Lowry, and I interviewed her for it turned out being Maine Women Magazine. Because as soon as the magazine people found out that I was interested, they snatched me up, and they have not stopped since. I have now been published in about 7 or 8 magazines that they have put out, mostly Maine Women's, but a few in Maine Seniors as well. And that has just been absolutely surreal. Seeing my work, my name, my pictures in an actual magazine, there are no words to describe that. It's an indescribable feeling of just joy and pride. And I get phone calls from my family members who get the magazine in their Portland Press Herald. And I just feel so happy and excited and content with the work that I'm doing. It's absolutely outstanding. Also, with this work, I've met really amazing people that I have no doubt I would never have had the opportunity to meet. I would not have met Lois Lowry if I wasn't doing this job. I got to meet Kate McAleer, who owns Bixby and Company here in Rockland, which is a chocolate company. She we got to sit, because it was during the pandemic, so there was nobody else there, and it was just Kate and I. We got to sit and talk about the process of making chocolate and her passion for it. And of course, I got to sample some of the snacks, so that was really cool. I got to meet Joel Cox, who is an artist who lives in Searsmont. Oh, I believe it's Searsmont. And yes, he lives in Searsmont, and he makes art out of scraps of trash. Things like scuba tanks, extra bits and bobs from when he worked making boats. And he has made furniture and benches and bells, and it's just beautiful. And the people that I've gotten to meet are probably my favorite part of doing this job. I've also got to meet Dr. Regan Thibodeaux. You might not be familiar with her name, but you would recognize her if you saw her. Dr. Thibodeaux is the deaf individual who does the sign language interpretation for the CDC briefings. And people often talk about her expressive face, and they'll say, "Oh, she's making funny faces." And I really got to express to my readers that the faces that she's making are actually part of American Sign Language. So when you are translating from spoken language to sign language, the facial expressions change the meanings of the word. And a lot of people didn't know that. So, not only am I selfishly able to meet all of these amazing, wonderful people, I'm also still educating the public through my work. I've formed relationships with people in towns and municipalities. A lot of them are just continuations of my life before. Kara George is the town manager in Thomaston. Kara and I went to high school. We graduated from high school together. So being able to reach out to her and say, "Hi, I'm working for the paper. I'm going to be covering Thomaston. Let's get together, and I want to do an interview with you." It was really fantastic. It was able to bridge that gap that might have been there if I hadn't known her already. I've learned so much through my time about elections and town government. I've learned about how, what is a town warrant and what is a town meeting, and I'm still learning a lot of that stuff because it's all very complicated. I was absolutely not a person who didn't know anything about the elections, but let me tell you, I didn't know anything about the elections, and I still have a lot to learn. It's absolutely insane. I thought before I started talking about journalism during COVID-19 that I would show you guys some of the magazines that I've done. So Joel Cox was one of my first ones that got published, and that was in Maine Senior Magazine. Oh, good. I tried to make sure that my screen wasn't flipped, so I'm glad to see that you can read it. So this was Maine Seniors in April of 2020. Cece had that wonderful presentation. I have had too many bad experiences with technology to leave it up to technology, let me tell you. But my time meeting Joel was amazing. This is a hobbit hole that Joel made out of a tree stump and a satellite dish. And I was able to go there and talk with him and go inside that little hobbit hole and see what he his process for building that was. I never would have had that opportunity if I hadn't had this job. This one is my favorite because this is the Lois Lowry piece. So it says Lunch with a Legend, and there's Lois. And here on, let me move this, there you go. On her couch, you can see her dog, Alfie. And Alfie is a senior dog. He's a little old man. And I got to sit on a couch with Lois Lowry, with her dog in between us, and we pet her dog together and talked. It was amazing. It was an opportunity that something I'd been wanting to do since she had moved in, I'd wanted to go and meet her, and I didn't get the opportunity until I became a reporter. I'm going to show you one more before I start talking about the COVID and being a journalist during COVID. Oh, the one I want to show you is Dr. Thibodeaux, because she was so fantastic, such a remarkable, remarkable woman. Here it is. So this is Dr. Thibodeaux. That's her spelling, signing the word snake, and there's a little snake on the road with her. And I only met Dr. Thibodeaux during over Zoom, and we had a translator, but our email correspondences have still continued, and she is a tireless worker for justice in the deaf community. Things that I didn't know about, things that I, as a hearing individual, am privileged enough to not have to think about. If I get pulled over by the police or I'm involved in a car accident, I don't have to worry about, are the police going to be able to understand me? Are the police going to make the effort to find a translator who will make sure that they can understand me and get my side of the story? And those were things that Dr. Thibodeaux had to think about all the time. So being clued into that other point of view was really inspiring for me, especially as somebody who was a former special educator. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about being a journalist during COVID-19 or coronavirus. The first thing that happened during COVID-19 was in March, very early in March, I did an interview. Someone tipped me off that a Madomic Valley High School graduate who is living and teaching in China had gone on vacation and was unable to return to her home because of the virus. And I reached out to her through Facebook. Let me tell you, thank goodness for Facebook. I would not be able to do half of my work if I didn't have that social media platform to reach out to people. And then, reach out to people that I know who know somebody and say, hey, can you tell so-and-so that I want to talk to them? So this woman's name was Amanda Barrows. Like I said, she graduated from Madomic. She is living and teaching in China. She's a kindergarten teacher. And I interviewed her. We had to do the interview over Facebook Messenger because the international phone call just didn't work. And talking to her about what life was like during the virus just seemed outrageous. She was telling me about guards in the street who were checking temperatures, empty transports, empty streets, having to report to your job twice a day to say, this is how I'm feeling, this is what my temperature is, not being allowed to go to certain places. I remember thinking when I read it, or when I first started writing it, all I could think was, this is absolutely outrageous. There is no way that anything like this is going to happen here in America. And then 2 weeks later, that's where we were. And it started with the entire office in Camden moving to working from home. So right now I'm actually in my bedroom. I have this wonderful sheet here that is my background so that I can be a little more professional than seeing all of my bric-a-brac kind of scattered throughout the room. The people that I do interviews with have become accustomed to seeing my cats. Actually, while Cece was talking, one of them decided that he was going to take a shortcut, and he went right over the computer. And anytime something like that happens, all I can think is, please don't hit any button that is going to change a setting that I am not going to know how to change back. There goes one right now. They do it all the time. I will, if I take a break and step away from the computer, one of them, her favorite thing to do is to jump on the computer and turn off my Wi-Fi, open a bunch of screens, and type a message. So I have an office set up in my bedroom. It's about 6 feet from my bed. which makes it kind of hard sometimes. Dan, plug your ears. It makes it kind of hard sometimes to do my work because my bed's right there and I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. And there's definitely days that I wake up and I think, how am I going to do it? How am I going to get up and walk the 6 feet over to my desk and start and pretend that everything is normal and that I am, that I know what I'm doing in the middle of this pandemic. So I just kind of, I kind of do fake it till you make it. What is news has changed during this time? Oh, I'm going a little long. What is news has changed during this time. The fact that events are still happening is news. Before it used to be, oh, this happened and this happened. Now, Rockland had a Black Lives Matter protest at the beginning of June. Yes, the beginning of June. And just the fact that that happened was big news. In fact, I'm going to show you guys, this is the front page from that, the Courier Gazette. It says, hundreds march in Black Lives Matter protest. And being able to be a part of that, and that's my photo. I took that photo. I was right there in front of them, feeling bad that I wasn't participating because I was there as a journalist. But I was participating because I was there covering it and I was there representing it and capturing it and making sure that this paper and that headline and that photo are going to be in the newspaper archives until society collapses. So I think I am ready for questions now. I apologize for going kind of long.
No problem. No, that was, I really appreciated everything you said. And I'm so impressed that you've come so far in your journalism writing in just, since 2019. That seems like yesterday. So
yeah, I started in October.
Congratulations. It's wonderful to hear that. And I'm happy that you're finding such joy in what you do now. I also, I was able to connect with what you said about how one of your favorite things about doing this job is all the different people you get to meet. And I just real quickly want to say that's something I experience with this job, doing these programs and the people I get to, hear in these presentations, as well as the people who join the presentations and the email communications we have. So yeah, this is a great way to connect with folks. So we did have a couple questions come in, and some of them are for Cece and you. So I'm going to go ahead and read those. Okay. So first of all, somebody named Joni mentioned, what a treat to even see you guys. So that's really nice. Another question or comment sort of came in. It says, do you know the writing Personal of Peter Hamill? He died just yesterday. See the New York Times obituary. A real inspirational writer, even if several generations ahead of you and male. I didn't know, are you familiar with Peter Hamill at all? No? Well, okay. We will definitely take a peek at that New York Times obituary then. Thank you, Paul, for recommending that. We had a question for Cece. It says, I'm curious to know now what is your major that you're studying in college, and also wanted to mention that it was a great presentation.
Well, thank you for whoever said that. My major is undeclared, but I am planning to major in geography and Middle Eastern studies, maybe with a minor of women, gender, and sexuality studies. But I won't declare probably for another 2 years since I'm taking some time off from college this year to avoid online school.
Thank you. Catherine's asking for both speakers, is the experience of seeing your work in print versus online different?
I'll take that one first, since Cece just answered the last one. It is absolutely a very different experience. There is something about the experience of seeing your work in print on something that you can touch, something that will, leave the newsprint behind on your fingers. Because I had seen the mock-ups for the magazines, for example. I had seen the mock-ups. And by the way, Dan's wife, Christine, is the one who does the layouts for the magazine, and she is phenomenal. She makes me seem so much more professional than I would on my own. So she would send me, when she's done with the articles, she sends them to me, and I get to look at them. And it's a very different experience to see it in glossy print, all laid out like 17 magazine was when I was a kid. And that's where the feeling really comes from, the feeling of pride and of accomplishment, is seeing it in print, being able to feel it, cut it out, paste it somewhere. Absolutely.
And Cece, how about you?
Yeah, it's definitely different. I remember once I emailed Dan, I was like, is the story up online yet so I can send the link around? And he said, get it the hard copy. It's just so much better. And he was completely right. So I have like a stack of all of my publications, and when I saw my name in print for the first time, it was like that classic experience of having your first byline. But I also think I've, for most of my life, only ever consumed online media. So I'm used to that. And I think that for me, it's not as drastic of a difference consuming online media versus in print. And I think I actually prefer to I like to see my writing in print because that's more fun, but I like consuming media online better.
Yeah, I think that, the holistic experience of holding the magazine or holding the newspaper and seeing your work amongst all these other things is very different than if you are, looking at something online. Just the way that people consume online news is so very different than when they're sitting down with a newspaper to actually read it. We have a couple more minutes for these last two questions. This question is from Jacqueline. It says, for both of you, how does COVID affect your relationship / interaction with your editor? And Christine, do you want to answer that first?
Sure. COVID has made communication in general really difficult. I complain to Dan all the time that I feel really disconnected from him, but at the same time, I understand it's not safe for us to be in the office all crowded together. I miss the experience of being with my coworkers, and it's frustrating sometimes when I need an answer and I need it right now. I'll call him and text him and email him, and I have to wait. But it's also been a lesson in patience and in making my own decisions, which is really important for a journalist.
Thank you. Cece?
I've never met Dan in person, although I know him, because we'll chat about the stories. We're both Twin Peaks fans, and that was fun to figure out. But it's really hard, and I've been getting so much incredible advice, but I feel so bad every time. I feel like I'm inundating his inbox when I'm asking, questions. But I'm just grateful that he's put up with it and continued to be an incredible mentor throughout this summer.
Thank you. Lila or Leela, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Do you find the process of being edited frustrating sometimes, particularly when the material is something that you really like is deleted?
I'm going to take this one first because when I saw this question, I'm very excited to answer it. I find being edited to be a bit of it's a blessing and a curse. It's wonderful to have somebody there to catch your mistakes and help you improve your writing, but it's frustrating when you don't have the final say over what gets published. I've found, particularly with the magazine, I will write in a certain style or I'll use a certain word and I will love it, and then they'll take it out. And it's frustrating and a little bit heartbreaking because it's your work, but they have the final say. And sometimes it almost feels like I don't want to take credit for it because it changed it just enough that I'm not in love with the writing anymore. But in the end, all the stories are my creations, and they all have a special place in my heart.
Cece?
I agree. I think it's a blessing and a curse too, because sometimes I'm so grateful that someone caught an error or was able to restructure the piece in a way that makes it just a much better read. But when you're writing for different publications that have their own style, and I'm still trying to figure out what my voice is as a writer, so trying to navigate both finding my own voice and writing in the style that someone else has asked me to, I think is a really difficult process. Also, reading, I took a seminar on Emily Dickinson and then I wrote a piece on it, and everyone knows that I just like loved this class so much. But one of the main pieces, the takeaways, was the various editors imposed, I guess, their perceptions of the work on it, and then that's changed the way that we read Dickinson. So I have definitely like become a little bit more skeptical of the editing process when I read news, to know that it's a team that's working on a piece of writing. And sometimes it's not changed at all. Like I made a comma mistake and that was shifted, or sometimes it's just, restructuring ideas or paragraphs, or getting comments like make this a little bit more snappy or interesting. But so most of the time it's really not a big deal, the editing. But on the few instances where it's changed a lot, I think I agree with Christine that it's sometimes you see your name attached to the piece that maybe doesn't feel like it's yours.
That makes sense, absolutely. So if we could just give quick answers to this last question. Regarding social media, do either of you use Twitter at all? It seems fairly corrosive to our society. This all reminds me of the real value of professional local news outlets. We all need to subscribe, Village Soup, Bangor Daily News, even the Free Press. Christine, do you want to comment on that, on Twitter?
Sure. I have a Twitter account that I made years ago when Twitter kind of first started, but I'm not really active on it. Some of that is my age, but not all of it, because Dan has an active Twitter account and he is much older than me. I say that just to bother him. But I'm active on Facebook. I'm active on Instagram. And I think that the printed word, like we were talking about earlier, the printed word is just, there's something that is special about it.
Cece?
Every time I've talked to another young writer, they've told me to build my social media account, because sometimes that's how they've been hired. I liked this like feminist fashion blog called Man Repeller, so I talked to some of the writers who are featured on it, who are young, and they said you need to get a social media following because that's going to help you stand out if you want to write for this publication. And then everyone else, not everyone else, but a lot of other people have told me to get a Twitter and make a Twitter, and write your commentary on it, because that's how you're going to distinguish yourself in the field. So that's like a piece of career advice that I've gotten time and time again. And I haven't made one yet because it's a lot of work to maintain a social media profile and have it be active and at the caliber that I think I would want mine to be. So I will likely make one in the future. I think it's important, but I have an Instagram, I have a very inactive Facebook, and that's it.
I'm going to end this here with a couple comments that just came in. It says, wonderful presentations. This is from Bill, by the way. Wonderful presentations. Keep following your expressive curiosity. Jacqueline wrote, thank you so much. It was a great panel and wonderful to get your insights. I look forward to reading more of your work. Heather says thank you. Dan says thank you. And I want to thank Dan for connecting me with these two lovely, I'm going to call you young, Christine, because I'm still older than you, lovely young women. And it was very, very interesting to hear these different stories about your journeys to journalism. So once again, thank you both so much. For all of you who tuned in tonight and joined us, thank you so much. And please remember to let folks know that they can find a recording of this presentation on the Camden Public Library Programs YouTube channel. If you have any trouble finding it, just reach out to me and I'm happy to send you a direct link. And you can always reach me at jpierce, J-P-I-E-R-C-E @librarycamden.org. Please come and join us for another program in the future. And with that, I sign off. And goodbye and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.